Today we're joined by Eric Arceneaux, my personal vocal coach. As mentioned by our previous podcast with him, he is a professional vocal coach. I was introduced to him by Ben, who didn't have the ability to show up for this podcast today because he's tremendously busy.
Mhm.
But I want to say thank you, Ben, for putting us in touch. It's been a
Yes,
pleasure to
sir.
know you, and I'm looking forward to this, man. Thank you for showing face.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, I had a great time last time, so I'm looking forward to discussing whatever. Yeah.
Likewise. Well, we've had the pleasure of having some really cool conversations during our sessions, and perhaps maybe not the most uh, uh, singing focused, but I think that we've seen a lot of like overlap between how both of us look at our careers and how we oftentimes relate to clients. And uh, I guess I've just been tremendously impressed with your perspective, knowing that there's so much that people go to you for, and perhaps they may not know that they come to you with extra baggage. And you have a very tactful and charismatic way of kind of bringing to light some things that maybe they don't want to look at in a way that fosters a lot more growth than maybe someone coming to a vocal coach at first might expect. So to put that in question for him, when you start with a new client or we start with a client who comes and they find themselves at a hurdle, what is the first thing that you take into account? Like, you know that they're playing with a bunch of things that are highly stimulative and new, and it could be fun, it could be scary. What's in your mind?
Um, I'm looking at their posture and how they hold themselves. I'm looking at their breath cycle. I typically do not tell them that I'm looking at these things because if I say that, then they will become self-conscious and they'll start making adjustments and they'll start getting all wonky and either camouflaging issues or creating brand new problems. And so, but I'm looking at that. Uh, I do diagnostics. I run diagnostics to try to assess what is a physical limitation because there are limitations that might be purely a lack of muscle strength or a lack of flexibility somewhere. But there are other things that are more psychosomatic, and the voice is largely an expression of our life force energy, or to put it in other terms, it's an expression of the health and maybe freedom of our fascial matrix. It's an expression of how the regulation or lack thereof of our nervous system. So I'm looking at a lot of these things, and one to kind of ground it a little bit. I get a lot of people who come to me with psychogenic dysphonia. I talk about this a lot, and so they have trauma-induced voice loss. And a thing that I kind of that maybe people wouldn't expect, I try to draw people into in small doses getting comfortable with being with intense feelings because most people I deal with who have some kind of psychologically induced voice loss or trauma induced voice loss, they pride themselves on being strong. And in our society today, we kind of view the proof of your intelligence, the proof of your spirituality, the proof of your civility lies in your ability to pretend as though you don't feel things. And I get clients who will say, you know, my mom just died, but I'm
Hmm.
fine. I'm the strong one in the family. I didn't cry or anything. I'm strong. And we kind of praise that. And that's not necessarily like, it's your mom, dude. You know, like no one's going to, you know, you're not a wuss for shedding a tear over your mom unexpectedly, you know? So, but we have that. Or my favorite, there's a lot of tone policing. So, like, you know, if we're having an argument, oh, you got emotional, I win. Even though I may not have a cogent argument, you might have made a whole bunch of points, but you showed anger. So,
Yeah.
therefore, everything you say is rendered null and void. You
Yep.
lose. You lose. And so we do that kind of thing. And so people kind of learn early on, or like I was a gymnast when I was younger. And I was praised for my ability to pretend like I didn't feel pain. I was like a kid. We were
Yeah.
walking around like we were on a battlefield, like just, you all right? Yeah, I'm fine. I'm fine. And you run and you do it again and you jack up your body in ways that are going to take you decades to fix, you know? And so, but looking back, I can think of innumerable examples of just being praised for my ability to pretend like I didn't feel things. And I see that a lot with people. And I find that most commonly, I'm trying to coach people on learning that they're allowed to feel anger and the medicinal qualities of anger, A
Mm,
lot of times people who lose their voices did not grow up around people, adults who managed anger well, so they don't believe that it can be managed well. So they think that anger is itself, they pathologize anger itself. And
right.
that's something that I end up having to teach them, like, you know, you've got to feel it in your body, your suppression of that, or your suppression of how afraid you are. Like you, it's not, it's hard to get people to get this because they think I'm asking them to ruminate. They think I'm asking them to play back a movie in their mind or to run through a script, but I'm asking them to feel somatically the quickening of their heart, the locking of muscles, to notice the shift in breath cycle. I'm asking them to feel. And
Yeah,
I think most people, it's kind of a tug of war, but it's part of my secret to help people get out of this kind of voice loss. Um, because there's only so much that lip trills and stuff are going to do if you haven't done that kind of work to like to feel yourself. So that's a big chunk of it for sure. Yeah.
I'll agree with you there. That the subtle stuff that I find the most value in sometimes is oftentimes the stuff that takes a bit of manufacturing for someone who's a little bit less far along in their own uh self-perception. So if they haven't spent the time, and this is like there's a dependency on expecting the performance to kind of tell them how they are as opposed to checking in or being able to self-diagnose or like at least do a diagnostic test, then more often than not, that simple one is like it's hard to perceive the value because they're thinking all these things or they're feeling all these things. And you had said uh, not have people as they pathologize anger, whatever the emotion may be, whatever the sensation or experience may be. The difference between feeling and perception is exactly that. You want them to feel their feelings. You don't want them to tell themselves stories and configure around the feelings as if they're uh, like that other feeling. Or the perception is where a lot of us falter in our ability to understand what sensation is, what feeling is, uh, what emotion is, and then the conglomerate and how that might remind us of a like higher intensive states of stress or trauma or whatever it may be, because you're perceiving so many inputs at once. You have no choice but to be like, okay, things are moving faster. That must mean that things are scary like they once were.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I find that this work has revealed to me that a lot of folks have issues with like authority. And I think there's something about me that, and I think this is a good thing that makes some people feel safe who maybe wouldn't otherwise feel safe with other folks. And so they uh, they reveal things. And one aspect that comes up very frequently is I try to get people to embody themselves is this idea of I don't want to take up too much space physically or sonically, which is another kind of physical space thing. Because I hear this a lot. Like I'll give you an example. Um, One of the aspects that I teach is ribcage expansion, and this is a thing that's kind of I see becoming more prevalent in the like fitnessy world of like breathing to like decompress the spine and keeping everything open. Singers have been doing this for hundreds of years, where you open up and you have to keep everything suspended so that the breath can be contained. And what you'll see is that people will open up and they'll sing, and as soon as they're done, they'll
Yeah,
collapse again. And people don't realize because your diaphragm is moving 24/7, you're going to get your reps in. But if you're collapsed and you're inhibiting the free range of motion, there's going to be a net negative. Like you're going to be weaker. So if you're just opening occasionally when you're performing a vocal feat or doing a breathe, this actually feels horrible to just even kind of fake this right now, actually. But but they do this, and what comes up a lot, because I used to get frustrated thinking people weren't doing their exercises and training, but what I found over time was a lot of times that wasn't the case. It's that when I finally crack people open, they say things like, Eric, but now the ladies at work are gonna think I'm a bitch. They're gonna think I'm a total bitch if I'm open. Or I feel like I'm trying to be somebody.
yeah,
I don't or like Eric, no, I'm a humble person. I'm not somebody who's so proud. And it's like I think a lot of people, the breathing coach who changed my life, and I don't say his name because there's a story there, but I'll say that for another time. When I blew up as a vocal, in short, when I blew up as a vocal coach, he wanted me to pay him retroactively for all the help he gave me when I was a college student, which is crazy.
yeah,
But one of the things that he told me when he first met me was, of course you can't sing. You're apologizing for yourself. And in old pictures, I'm working on a book, and I have a lot of old pictures of me just like folded in and like kind of looking like a rectangle. And by nature, I have broad shoulders and a broad chest, but I would not realize my nature because I was constantly trying to shrink myself because it felt like safety. And I thought I, I was afraid of being powerful because I had been around people who did not wield their power in a healthy way. They would wield it in a way that would cause terror. And so yeah, so I was like, that's the only way it can be done. So I'm just going to be the antithesis of that. And over time, when I would open up and realize people responded to me differently, they would straighten up when I spoke to them, or they would adjust when they saw me step into a room. And I didn't like it at first. I was like, who am I to have this effect on people? And I would find myself wanting to close, and I would hear my first breathing sensei's words in my mind, like, you're apologizing for yourself. And it stifles your voice, like literally, like it stifles all of the mechanics that you need. It makes you succumb to gravity, and your body kind of seals shut, and your voice won't move. And it's what I see very often is that a lot of people are afraid of being powerful, and partially with the advent of social media becoming such a leviathan in like society, everybody's so terrified of critique that they're afraid to express themselves at all. Like it's like everybody's just so I when I first started coaching and I would work with artists from major labels, there was a lot of rebellious energy. Like, Nathan, they want me to be like a boy band guy, but I'm a rocker, man. I'm gonna tell the truth. That they want me to do this like Will Smith rap. I'm gonna talk about what's in the street. Like they was like, I wanna like they want me to be another Mariah Carey, Eric, but I'm gonna just sing about what I care about, and I'm gonna like fight like it was this kind of thing. Now it's what's she doing? She has 1 million followers. Like, Eric? Should I be singing like that? Should my hair swoop
Yeah.
like that? And it's not just kids. This grown up people, 20 years
Yeah.
my senior, like saying like, oh, should I? Do you think I should get like the fat sucked out of my cheeks? Do you think I should do that? Why would you say? Well, I see that they have like 700,000 views on that video, and should I get like a buckle fat? And I'm like, oh my God, everybody's so terrified of being seen. Like they don't wanna, they're terrified of being like seen existing. And so there's this kind of fear of being judged. And the body reacts to a fear of being judged in a very similar way to fear of physical assault in terms of how it affects our breathing and the tightening that fight, flight, freeze engages. And
Total response.
yeah, exactly. So all that long-winded ass way to say, a lot of the work I do is like trying to like help people orient. We do breath work to try to stimulate stuff coming up. Really, another again to kind of ground it and make it less nebulous. To be very specific, the rib cage gets tight. So in order for your diaphragm to reach full strength, your rib cage has to be able to close at some point and empty and supple, so that when it's released, everything can open fully. So in short, the rib cage needs to be supple enough to close, to say I'm safe, I can let the armor down, and it needs to be strong enough to open so that we can command the power of our breath and our voice on when we need that as well. But that fight, flight, freeze, that sympathetic nervous system response tends to create rigidity, and it just makes it so that you're kind of stuck in the middle. You don't really open, you don't really close, and then over time you kind of start to sink. But it just gets tight. So people can't access their full breath. I think it's why a lot of people suffer from COVID the way they do, even when they have no comorbidities, even when they're really young. It's because they're not getting that good ventilation, circulation. They're just, everything is, they can't even do the basic homeostasis kind of housekeeping internally because everything's so rigid and there's not that good exchange of, so it's a lot of work with that. And so when people say, I can't, and stuff comes up, a lot of it's just letting them know it's okay to feel things. It's okay to have tears that you can't explain. It's okay to have rage that's out of context. Not that you have to resort to criminality or go hurt somebody, but you can let yourself feel it. And sometimes a lot of people are surprised to find that I'm like, yell if you can. Like if you can do so without causing like a problem, where you are, but like yell, like just, I've had clients grab a phone, go out into the woods behind their house, like scream, yell, as long as you're not gonna like create a panic where you are, like get it out. Like sometimes we just gotta mobilize that stored survival energy in order to really get the other work to stick.
So you'd said something that was interesting, which was that sorry, camouflaging. Everyone to some degree is camouflaging, and then later on you had talked on people having a propensity to avoid the thing that they perceive as being threatening to others or whatever it may be. Like, I can't embody that kind of behavior because that's going to be something that's going to start to create a fear response that I'm familiar with. I don't want to be the person doing that.
Totally, totally.
So, in the nicest way possible, this is something that we all deal with, myself included, you included, everyone included. It's just our wherewithal to how much we want to take accountability for how much it is a present issue. That's a quality of narcissism. That is to preemptively expect your state or your experience to be the thing that other people are also going to experience in the same way.
Yeah,
You have to give people the chance that maybe perhaps you wanted to like re-give yourself, but you're now living in this quality of like, I couldn't handle it. Could other people handle it? And
yeah,
then
yeah,
that nature of like, maybe you're a kid. You can't really qualify you kid versus 35-year-old you and say they're both the same.
yeah,
There's a
yeah.
degree of
Totally.
contention that will always be because there's less time spent experiencing you, your reaction to things, how conscious you are of managing those reactions. There's a ton of things, and you had said you do a really cool job of, I guess, referring to what difficulties people might face being in a state of anger. He's like, don't turn to crime. Uh, and I think that something to be said of because people don't know what to do when they're in the state that's going to remind them of all those things that was a part of their past, and there's already text to it, there's already pictures to it, they already see that there's actions and behaviors that exist in that state. They may not have the quality of being like, okay, if it looks like that, why would it look any different now?
Exactly. Yeah,
And that quality is so self-immunizing. It's like you're diminishing your ability to even create in the first place, which is the have all be all of when we're trying to fix and repair things in our body. It's not a measure of uh pulling together all your resources. It's a creative effort. You're in a state of generating more uh want and previously like extra surpoof surper probably shouldn't say words I can't pronounce. Perfume. Oh,
yeah.
dude. Okay. We're gonna pretend I didn't say that. Edit that part out, everyone, from your brain. Uh, extra unnecessary qualities like that word me trying to use in this conversation, uh, to present what isn't being expressed, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that is the problem with the English language, that we have so many words that are just yada yada yada, and we're all trying to like limbically connect, or I'm trying to speak into your feelings when you're not speaking from your feelings. And there's this like collaborative disassociative state that we're all just like, I'm gonna outthink this conversation with you.
hmm,
I think at the end of the day, the real issue that you talked on that we can touch on more is that when people think that their job is to camouflage, is to fit in,
yes,
then they're doing the job of looking like, being like, and acting like everyone else, even if to their mind's eye it feels different, or it perceivably it must feel different because look at how I'm acting and they're acting. But most people do take that step down, which is, I don't want to be like that. Oh,
yeah,
proud chest, or even if you're in that proud chest and you don't know how to like uh not think about being proud, or not forcing the action when you're
yeah,
trying to do the
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
And all of it is to the effect of, if you're not fluid in your flexibility between feeling one thing, feeling another thing, thinking one thing, which is just the nature of the brain and nervous being alive and being like, I can feel them. If I can't, that's the problem. And more often than not, people like change their image for what is a healthy person. And a healthy person is someone that feels and experiences that contention within themselves that makes it sometimes hard to know what they feel, makes it hard to know what they think. And that's very
totally.
normal.
Totally. It's funny you mentioned the narcissism. You quoted something from my past, and you didn't even know that. I, in my early 20s, lost my ability to speak for a month. Not from my vocal folds, but my jaw locked tight for a month. I could not move it.
Mm.
To long story short, did all the conventional medical tests. I was healthy in every measurable respect, and I was like, but clearly I'm not though, because I can't talk. Finally met a TMD expert who, and I'm trimming a lot of fat off this story. He's like, let me level with you, Eric. You're um, too articulate. And he's white, and that matters because at first, as a black person, I was like, wait, what do you mean? I'm too articulate, you know? So it was kind of, and he seemed to immediately read my face. He's like, no, let me explain. Let me explain. You're too edited. You're too edited, and it's killing you.
Yeah.
And he was like, nobody's this friggin' diplomatic. He's like, you need to curse. You need to drop some F bombs. He's like, I'm gonna help you release your jaw, but if you don't start letting some of this stuff out, we're gonna release your jaw, then it's gonna go to your shoulder, eventually your heart as you get older. And one of the things he said was, and I hate when people read me, or I hate it. I kind of don't care now. I know who I am, but at the time, he was like, "Let me guess, you're the kind of person you think you could take the truth, but other people can't take it. You think you've got to adjust everything everybody else because you can handle it, but other people can't. And so it's your job to manage the emotions of everybody around you. And sometimes you think you're being nice, but you're really just trying to make sure that you maintain your image." And he was just telling me all this stuff about me, and I was fuming, but I also could not deny the veracity of what he was saying. And it was the start of me kind of achieving it was a big shift, a paradigm shift for me in how I taught. My voice grew substantially in terms of like volume and range and fullness over that, because I realized that I really was trying to restrict myself because and it was a thing. And to be fair, I wasn't making it up. I was in situations. I was the head of a vocal department at a renowned performing arts school. I'll leave it at that. And the meetings would go as such, like where, let's say Daphne was talking, and well, I think that the level 3 girls in ballet should do X, Y, Z, and the vocalist should like. Well, I think, whoa, Eric, you're being really aggressive right now. If you could just kind of calm it down. Oh no, I wasn't arguing. I was just saying, oh, I'm sorry, this is just a lot for me right now. And they would start crying, and I was like, okay. And over time, I learned I can't speak with the fullness of my voice. I have to kind of pitch my voice up. And if you look at my old videos, I'm kind of speaking in a different way because I want to be like, I'm not threatening and like, oh no, I'm not like those other guys that you've seen on TV. Like, I'm not gonna, like, I gotta make you feel safe. I gotta cater to you because also if you're too afraid, that could turn out really unsafe for me. So I have to really shrink myself because me existing in the fullness of my power is terrifying to you. So I have to like preemptively. So yeah, and so around the time that I lost mobility and function in my jaw, I was teaching at this place, and I have a student. Shout out to Mandana Mafi, who's a successful Iranian classical singer. She's Sufi, which is kind of like a mystical sect of Islam. And she looks at me, she meets me, and she goes, "Oh, Han, you're choking on unspoken words." And I was like, "Oh." Glenda the Good Witch here is just like, everyone, how come, it was crazy. It was like, how come everybody can see it and I couldn't see it? Like, people kept telling me, a lot of people who just were more intuitive, or read bodies for a living, they could see it like that. Like, oh, you're apologizing for yourself, or you're choking on unspoken words, or you gotta like let it out. When I quit that job, explosively, my jaw was super free. It was very, and they did the thing where I've been pulled over by a cop who tore my clothes. And it's a short version of a long story. Then he let me go, but like literally ripped the buttons on my shirt. And when I arrived to the school, they were like, "Well, what did you do? Did you attack the police officer?" And I was like, did I attack the police? You've known me for all these years. You think I attacked the police officer? Wow. And they were like, "Well, that's the only thing it could be. That's the only thing it could be." Wow. That's the way. And so one of the what do you call it? The receptionist is like, "Well, Eric, Black people aren't the only people with problems. When I was young, I worked at Foot Locker, and the manager used to call me white girl." It's like, okay, well, Stephanie, I guess we're fucking even then. I guess, And so, and then, of course, they were like, "Well, Eric, we're being calm. You're getting upset. We're being calm." And I go, "Oh, is that what we're doing? We can say any asinine thing we want as long as we use this tone? Okay, well, fuck you, and fuck you." And then I quit. But my jaw was really, I was like, "Oh wow, my jaw is so free right now." And so it was a powerful a lesson for me that day of how, like, I had a built-in BS detector. My body would not let me. My body was like, "We're not doing this anymore. You either tell the truth or the truth of how you feel in the moment, not the objective truth, but your truth, I guess you could say. Um, or else we're not gonna." My body was like, "We're not doing this anymore, man. We're not gonna keep functioning in this state of like trying to like manage everybody else's view of you, or like perpetually be in this place of like seeking safety to an irrational degree." And but all that to say, with each instance, my voice grew, and not just like artistically, my prowess as a vocalist improved, but my speaking voice changed, and the shape of my body began to change. With people would say things like, "Oh man, you've been working out." I was like, "Actually, no." I've been like breathing and shit. Like I've been taking full breaths. Like my actual frame began to shift, and like literally people would say things like, "Did you get taller? Are you like still growing?" And I did get taller, but not from a place of like growing. Like I was decompressing. And I was never the person to even approach life like this. I took refuge in the whole like these anatomical models, and we have interretinoids and cricothyroid and thyroretinoid and larynx tilt. I didn't want to think about energy or emotions or even things like meridians and different systems and functional. Like, can we just keep it to the larynx and just? But I was forced to face the fact that everything was interconnected. I was like, oh crap, I have like feelings and stuff, and it affects things, and how I respond to those feelings uh, is playing a part in how my voice shows up in a way that I could no longer deny. It was very obvious because people kept bringing my attention to it. Like, your speaking voice has changed. You look different. What's going on? Like, what are you doing? So I was like, I'm cursing people out more. I'm telling people where they can get the fuck off. That's yeah. So it's very healing to curse
Dude,
people out. Yeah. So that's my message to the masses. Curse everybody out. Just do that. Yeah.
learning to speak up, and not in the way it's like a. So I think one thing that's hugely productive to differentiate in the way that you did yours versus how someone might perceive that is you had momentum. You were trying to purpose it towards something. It wasn't being received. And so you needed to not only absolve yourself of that, like, uh, I don't know, commitment to their feelings in that relationship, but you needed to know that it wasn't something that you had uh, uh, a need to fulfill anymore. And so, to some degree, if there's no reciprocal, like social etiquette, if
Mm,
everything is a facsimile or like a fake quality of like when people they mask up their it's a charade of experience, and you from your perspective the things that you give people at an effort, you're like, come on, we're not even on the same level of like baseline what I'm presenting you of
right,
myself. How
right.
is it that you could go so far as to tell me that uh my behavior's not right?
Yeah.
And the fact is that some people, and a great many actually in my experience, because they've made their miniature of what life is, and they more often than not, their hands are like they're walking around and they have this grip in their hands. It's not like you don't have to walk around like you're karate chop in the air, but when there's not tone in your system, you're not going to feel like you have to hold things. And so there's a plethora of things that people do in their body,
Yeah.
holding their hands, holding their feet, holding their hips and their groin,
Yeah.
and having like
Yeah. Yeah.
bladder control issues or incontinence or something to the extent of stress related, like I'm not letting it go. And that goes everywhere. We start to do it in every place. And the thing that so many of us don't even notice is like we call ourselves ugly, we call ourselves tired, we call ourselves all these kinds of things, but can you really feel those features on your face, or are you just looking at them in a mirror? Like,
Yeah.
can you
Yeah.
feel it?
Yes. Just yeah. 100%. That one of the things that I mentioned proprioception a lot, kinesthetic awareness, interoception. I'm sure you guys mention these words a billion times with what you do, but this work has taught me when I'm training teachers, especially, we talk a lot about this, how a big part of our work is to help people come embody themselves again, to inhabit their vessel, to feel. Most people have no clue what the hell is going on in their bodies. I've had clients who, things are videoed, like kind of what we're doing now, and they'll literally be in the lesson, and I'll ask, like, Kenny, like what's going on with like the Twitch or whatever. And I'm making up names here, Daphne, Kenny. These are all just made up names, but these are real stories though. Kenny, what's going on with the Twitch? Oh, I don't Twitch. Um, Me thinks you do. Like, let's run this back. Like, oh, I didn't even realize I was doing that, dude. You didn't
Wow.
realize you were doing that? Like, come on. But people are just so disembodied. It's crazy. But one of the things that I really try to teach, and I practiced it for years, but I've only recently begun teaching it because I'm in the Bible Belt and people freak out. We just actually got accused of like demonic stuff just like a couple days ago, which is always funny. But we teach spontaneous movement, which has many names in different cultures. And Qigong is called Zifa Gong, induced Qi flow. I try to stick to Western paradigms. I try to know my audience, but pandiculation in Indonesian is latihan, and parts of Africa it might be Kalahari fire, in Japan it's Seiki Jutsu. But it's the idea of, can we allow the breath to mobilize our bodies and to decompress fascia. And, depending on your perspective and what you could view it as like energy circulating, which is kind of literally true. I know sometimes energy means like a woo-woo thing to people, but our bodies conduct electricity. There are electrical currents running through you at all times. Like, how else are you making fingers spin? Like, how else are you making things move? But your body has these mechanisms by which it can decompress itself and unwind itself. And we make use of these in part to force you to return to feeling, but also help you to break certain habits that you might be stuck in, certain patterns. Like you said, sometimes the best thing is to like let your body go on autopilot and unwind itself, and to let it express some of those things that have been in the queue. Some of those things like when you wanted to square up, when you wanted to speak, when you have that kind of built up neuromechanical energy in your jaw, at the tongue root, in your chest, because you really wanted to stand up to that person, but you couldn't, maybe because you were 8 or whatever, but it's still in you and it needs to come out. And I find that I've had really great benefit with helping people. The type of Qigong that I grew up studying, they teach that the spontaneous action is really what it's all about, and that a lot of the masters, I know we've talked about this in the past a bit, but like, let's say Master Q is doing his breath work, and he starts to move, and it's like, oh wait, that was great. What can I call that? Painting the sky. Painting the sky. How did you do that? And then it becomes codified, but it really began as a spontaneous movement. It's not even necessarily that it's what you need to do. His body was doing what it needed to do for his own healing and restoration and homeostasis. And if we can tap into that, it's just a really powerful tool to unwind everything. And I find that it really, if I could get people into that state, which is its own challenge, but if I can
Yeah.
get people in that state, it fixes a lot of stuff. I've had clients say things like, I feel like I'm feeling empathy for the first time, or I feel alive for the first time, or, whatever. But it allows us to have access, because a lot of people, they're kind of like granite, they're like stone, and I can't make a dent until we start to soften them and
Yeah.
supple them in certain ways, because otherwise nothing I do is going to stick, because they're just so like, to your point, actually I have a client that came to my mind, which is why I started smirking when you mentioned the hands. But when he comes here and he walks, I always think to myself, like, that can't possibly be comfortable. Like, there's no way that's comfortable. Like, there's just no way. Like, it's making me feel tight in my shoulders just thinking about it. Like, my delts are tightening up. But it's like, that can't be a comfortable way to move.
Dude,
But he's like toy soldier kind of, yeah.
comfort. So there's so many people who don't have a standard or threshold or even like a baseline of what comfort is in their system. It's relative other people. It's always they can contextualize how their behavior kind of looks on the outside relative someone else's, and they know underneath it all, I'm more contentious because I'm doing these things and I'm not able to like settle into these things. It's their fault, but I'm doing it. And there's always this like disassociative, like I'm gonna accept what I am, and if they don't, it's their fault or their problem.
Yeah.
I think something that we can almost all of us in some way relate to is seeing someone who you imagine that there's like a story running in their head that, or like a script running in their head because their behavior is so consistently the same, and whether it's happy or negative or whatever, the consistency, that lack of reflex, or that lack of like, you poke them and you see like there'd be some adjustment, it's unnatural. And you say you're in the Bible Belt, and I imagine when because pendiculation is oftentimes associated with like people who have snakes in church and stuff like that. Uh,
Hmm. Hmm.
and oftentimes anything that is non-associative, non-biblical, or non-monotheistic energy practice or anything of the sort, it's perceived as a deterrent from taking the time to appreciate the book of God or the word of God or whatever it may be. And I think there's a overlap that a lot of people really, really mismanage, that in the same way that many stories in the Bible are esoteric by nature, there's a esoteric quality about many of the things that energetics are, to lead you to self-realize, such that
Yeah.
you don't feel like you're playing into a script someone else has uh, collaboratively like formulated for you, so you end up being that person's product, which is a lot of people's fear. Their parents were in some way or another not who they wanted to be received by, so they're like, I don't want to be like this, so I don't end up treating people like this.
Yeah.
But by
Yeah.
nature of that avoidance, they in some fabric create it again, but in a different form. And if only, and I know this is a huge ask, but if only people took into account, like if they were looking at themselves as they were looking at uh, uh, a puppy, or an infant, or something that is not yet fully realized into its adult behavior, you accept that you have to carry it along a little bit.
Hmm. Yes. Yeah.
And even though now you have a time perception that scales not so much interactively with the flow of time, but you can perceive past, present, and future as an adult, there are scales of not really knowing how to, what do I think about right now? How do I be? What do I, and all those things are because the nervous system and body are dealing with things that you've been holding on to, or you're anticipating,
Yeah.
all to the effect of you haven't experienced something to prove yourself wrong, or you haven't experienced the stress factors that
Yeah.
would teach you the stability that you could take away into your next day, and then build it a little more, build it a little more, and then maybe 2 months down the line, you're like, damn, I can't even believe I was like that. And I didn't even have the language for it. And they still probably don't have the language for it, but take away the fact that we're all infantile in some way.
Hmm. Hmm.
And even if we have these great markers of success or great markers of clarity in our vision, whatever it may be, every person feels inadequate in their own realm some way or another, and we're all building around that image. And since your image is different than mine, we're behaving around ourselves different. And it's only when we start to behave with at least acknowledgement of that limitation, without presuming how someone's going to receive us kind of allowing them to see that.
Hmm.
And then when it kind of gets ugly, being like, You're, I apologize. I'm working through it. I hope you can be patient. It's
Yeah.
not on
Yeah.
you. It's my whatever. I can understand if it's frustrating. None of the
Totally.
things like, uh, this is just how I feel. This is the way I am. If you can't accept it, there's a nuance to being a human. You have to socialize even when you don't want to. And that's with everything. Like, you can't just fake your smile. Sorry to take more time. There's one thing I want to get your take on. I have a buddy who, since childhood, and I mean, he started talking to me about it after I was more formulative, after a couple of like substantial losses in my life, and I could like put more words to it, and I was, for lack of a better word, uh, a pessimistic optimist, in that I wanted for all the good things. I
Hmm.
also knew that the interplay with getting there was I had to deal with the reality of now. I wasn't where I wanted to be. The people in my environment weren't mirrors to that. So I was like, I'm not going to carry you to be who you could be while I'm not there. So
Yeah.
how do we figure this out? And that was like my adolescence, just confusion around uh, how to not pretend to be more mature than people that I'm still growing up with.
Hmm.
And it was really hard to realize, and I didn't. It was only until recently that I've started to kind of come to terms with some things. But He would always effort to tell me, uh, I want to look at the happy. I want to look at the happy. But I was looking at that happy. I just knew that I couldn't make it out of thin air. And so, not being like a magician with a rabbit in my hat, I couldn't figure out without frustration or without those negative emotions or without there being like some contention with the idea because I wanted to wrestle the idea. I wanted to beat the idea and like come out on top, but I also knew that I had no idea how to fight it. So I was like a degree of like, "Ugh." And I'm curious in your perspective, what is it to you, like the pathology that grows from there, if that never meets its opposite, like if I never met my opposite and he never met his, because we're both good people, but we both we interpret what our have all be all is from now in a very different way. And so he shows up more happy, but he's not. And I show up maybe a little bit more muted, but I'm happy.
Yeah, I my assistant Paul, that's his real name actually. He asked me recently, in your opinion, Eric, he's also training to be a voice teacher in my AApproach method. He's like, why do most people never heal? Why do some people never heal, in your opinion? And I was like, because I told him I was like, I'm woo woo as fuck. I believe that you can make whatever happen that you want to happen, but I believe that most people will always skip step one, which is facing the reality of the present moment, and most people can't be with that, and that's why they can't heal because a doctor can't prescribe a medication for a disease that he doesn't know exists. You know, Gabor Mate talks about this kind of dark joke of doctors in the oncology ward, like, oh, you know, Gabrielle is so nice. She's got breast cancer, right? Yeah, I figured she's so nice. There's this thing of women who are nice to death. How Gabor Mate has made this connection, um, really backed with a lot of research about how a lot of people they're kind of nice to death, like kind of like shellacking over all the crap you feel, um, with a layer of like, you know, look at the bright side and there's a silver lining because that energy does not evaporate with time. I think uh, one of the insidious curses in our society is like time heals all wounds. No, it doesn't. It festers. Like you've gotta. It's energy in the body that has to be expressed, and if it doesn't get expressed, your body never gets the cue that it's okay to heal, and to release in certain places. And I find that people that can't acknowledge moments of shittiness to whatever degree they can't make space for authentic joy and authentic peace. And so they have to kind of perform it. And then they say, I don't know why I'm not happy, or I'm doing everything right, or I don't know why I can't heal, I'm doing everything right. Like you're performing what you think right looks like, but you've got to really. I think one of the ugliest things we've done as a society is the stiff upper lip, like this idea that we're supposed to always chin up, just, you know, it's you gotta feel the crap to get to the good. Like you've got it's an energy form that has to be expressed in the body. And even with vocalizing particularly, the reason why a lot of people can't heal voices or grow voices is because of balance, and people hate it. We live in a society where people want it to be all just let go or just muscle through. The fact that you have to simultaneously hold on and let go, be firm yet soft and supple, it terrifies people because of what they feel is like an ever moving target. But it's just a realm of balance that, once you learn to inhabit it, you know, you're going to be mastering it all your life. I'm not saying like I'm just a bodhisattva who's ascended and I'm, you know, better than everyone, but it's you can tell when someone doesn't get it, and I've never seen it work out well for people when they suppress. Because the way I look at it is no one has the ability to stop feeling an emotion. You can either process it or you can suppress it. And when you suppress it, you seal it away in neuromuscular vaults and you pay storage fees on that in the form of headaches that are inexplicable. And the doctor says, okay, we believe that your stomach hurts. We can't see anything wrong, IBS. We believe that you're in pain. We can't see it, fibromyalgia. We believe you that you're having this issue, transient global amnesia, but all your tests say that there's no reason why you should be losing your memory. And every time I've seen people with these things, they're exactly what you're describing, especially with voice loss. With trauma-induced voice loss, everybody has two things in common. They've gone through some traumatic event and they've all decided that they're above feeling the anger, fear, whatever. They've all decided, oh, I'm past that now. But the fact that you can't speak says otherwise. And how I've been able to heal them repeatedly is every time I've ever healed someone or helped someone, not even heal them, every time I've ever coached someone into healing themselves, it's been to get them to feel the stuff that they were avoiding feeling for years. And that's just been the reality of my experience. So I've never seen it work out well when someone's like, nope, I'm gonna look at the bright side no matter what. Not that, and I believe in having gratitude for the things that are really good, but not at the expense of kind of suppressing all that stuff. Sometimes you have to lance the wound and let that grossness out so it can properly heal, you know. And so if we don't expel it, or it's kind of like being energetically constipated. Everybody poops, you know. Like you gotta get it out. Like if you don't, it's not gonna it's not gonna turn out too great energetically. So it's gotta be expressed. It's gotta be exorcised. Yeah.
Totally. Yeah, exercise, not in almost literally how the associative is pendiculation. The irony in
The thing is, it's funny you mentioned Dr. Brad Keeney, who does a lot of study on spontaneous movement, talks about how in the charismatic movement and evangelical movement, you see it among Christians who do like the snake handling or like certain Southern Baptist communities and stuff like that. But you know, there are so many different sects of Christianity, but there are also those people where I'm at who are like, you're letting demons into the body or whatever. But yeah, it's interesting. But yeah, I think that one of the ways that it comes out, ironically, is this kind of exorcism of people will weep, people will yell, people will groan, people will contort, nah, when it comes out sometimes, and it's kind of, if you're looking at it through this kind of Roman Catholicism lens or whatever, then it's like the exorcism of you know, like one of those scary movies of like, you know, Natalie Rose or what other movies go. But it's a process that I found is essential. Like you've gotta let it out. I think pathologizing, even in the worlds that we're adjacent to, and I know we both know people in this world without even asking you, people who are like, that's low vibrational. That's a trap. It's the most miserable people you'll ever meet. Oh no, Nate, I'm calm because I talk like this with a great deal of affectation. I am always calm. And calm means donning the uniform of someone who is spiritual and never expressing a unique thought, emotion, or movement. And so this is what it is because I'm terrified of being a full fucking human. That's not going to do anything for us. Like, but I see a lot of people performing holiness, performing spirituality. It's spiritual ego, and I have grace with people though, because like we both brought up, a lot of times people just have no frame of reference for someone expressing these feelings in a way that is safe. And I get that. And so sometimes I have to offer them tools of screaming into a pillow, ripping up a phone book, pendiculation, different vocal sounds we might make to kind of channel things. And so sometimes people are receptive, but they're like, okay, how? Like how can I get this out? Because I don't know a healthy way. Can you offer me some options here? You know? Yeah.
so with people that don't experience themselves as being willing or able to delve into new sensations or perceive that, oh, they already know what it's going to be like. That's demonic. That's not whatever. There is a touchstone of throughout life, there will always be a irregularity when you're dealing with other people or you're dealing with really any circumstance. You don't know how you're going to fatigue one day to the next if there's something in the air.
Yeah,
So
totally.
sometimes life just hits you, and to that effect, if we're already bracing, we're going to break into a bunch more pieces than if we were ready to experience deficit, which is to
Yeah.
say, every day, no matter what it is, when we wake up, we are at less coherence than we would be after a little bit of warming up, so to speak. So after you've had your morning coffee, but imagine no coffee, you did something interactive with your body to wake up your system. The
Hmm.
whole idea of warming up is literally thermogenesis. You're building up heat through oxygen production by way of carbon saturation, and then As you play into that, you start to regulate how hot you get with your oxygen, and it's no longer as interbulating. And there's degrees of like regulation that exist in the dance, so to speak.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah.
No matter what it is, when you are standing up, you're not posturing. You're preventing yourself from falling down through a bunch of minutiaes. They're
Yeah.
called
Yeah.
reflexes, but it's stuff you don't have to pay attention to.
Right.
And majority of people, because they've taken it upon themselves to be like, well, these are behaviors I don't know how to do, so I'm going to put them in the back and I'm going to make sure that they don't step out of bounds.
Right.
Because you've done that, you've made it so your body is less flexible to stimulus that may take you into a state that raises your intensity such that it reminds you of threat. That
Yeah.
threat would be immediately connotative toward the thing that you put in the back that you no longer look at, and that's kind of chasing you now.
Yes.
So to that same effect, where we're all very focally minded with our eyes, our hindbrain is where we create panic, we create impulse, a lot of the things that we don't have any order over happen where we put all that stuff. So to some extent, there is a coordination of, stuff is behind you. So it's not about focusing on the world that is in front of you as much, but knowing that you could be buffeted from sides, front, back, underneath, atop. It's the ability and willingness to walk outside and be like, no matter what circumstance I'm walking outside, I know that this is the nature of existence, and I have to kind of make sure that I learn to do it. If I don't, then I'm either going to drown, I'm going to be taken with the tides, or I'm going to be pruned by the water or exposure, all that flow, and not have any real wherewithal of how I feel, what I care about anymore. And now I'm a pickled human being because all this stimulus was like vinegar on my system, and now I'm like, "Ugh."
hmm Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. We have. I'm about to mess it up as I fight this sneeze. Um, as I suppress what my body wants to do. No. We there's a saying in qigong about stiffness. Softness is life and stiffness is death. And there's this beautiful poem about how we come into the world soft. As infants, we leave the world stiff, rigor mortis. A soft tree will bend in the storm. A stiff tree will break. And I teach in master classes that I give my clients regimented practices in the beginning, but I teach that there is no mastery through being regimented. You have to meet your body where it's at. You have to recreate the master every day. You're different every day.
You got to
Do
recreate the
do the
master every day. I like that. No camouflage. You're not putting on the camouflage every day. You have to recognize the master is not a master to himself. It's the height of circumstance, and the only way to not get consumed by the ego is to recognize you're learning each day.
totally. I tell people they think I wake up in the morning like a friggin' Disney princess, and I step out and and a butterfly falls upon my finger. My voice is just there, and I'm like, no. I tune into where my body's at now. The thing that brings me to mastery, with heavy on the hand quotes, I'm no longer afraid of the infinite variables. I trust in my ability to adjust and to flow, and that people want me to say do 20 reps of 3 sets, and that might be perfect today, and it might be even generally true. But maybe tomorrow you might need to do 1 set, or maybe not do that exercise at all. Maybe you need to focus more on this other thing. But if you can't kind of feel, it's almost like kind of tightening, like trying to get just the right amount of firmness. Some days you might be a little more yang, more tight. You might need to loosen more. Some days you might be a little too loose. You need to find more firmness, more energy, more compression. It varies. It can be because you ate at that weird Brazilian restaurant with your friends the other day and it just didn't sit right with you. It was too spicy. It could be because that thing you said didn't bother you might really be bothering you. You might have slept in a wonky position. Maybe you're on a plane for a long time because you flew from the West Coast to the East Coast. There's so many different factors, cofactors and confounders. There's sometimes you don't even know why, and you don't have to know why. You just have to make adjustments. And if you can't do that, if you're too beholden to like, no, but it says step 1, step 2, step 3. If you can't feel yourself and feel how to find center, then you can never find mastery or consistency, because inevitably, even if only through age, your body is going to change. And so you've got to learn how to adjust and flow with things. And again, that's part of why I like spontaneous movement so much. I feel like the body's wisdom is such that it'll kind of take you into where you need to go. I like the Chinese concept of the wise doctor, or inviting the doctor in for a visit. The idea that the breath, well, they look at it as more than just breath, it's kind of cosmic energy or whatever you want to see it as, but that it has an intelligence to it, and it will seek out those places that need the work, and how that it may be something different one day versus the next, or you might do something for 3 weeks and then your practice will take a different form spontaneously, maybe with some verbal stuff, maybe with different breath patterns, maybe with twisting your body in ways you didn't even imagine, maybe ways you've been avoiding. I find that ironically, a lot of people really have blockages with turning around mentally and nervous system wise, not just physically. I don't mean that there's a problem with their neck, but I mean they're like, oh, why do I feel like afraid to even turn? There's certain movements that people won't even allow themselves to explore. There's certain planes of motion, not, and again, not even because they physically are incapable, but they just like, oh, I didn't even, huh, like that feels inappropriate. And people will say that kind of stuff to me a lot. Like, yeah, so that's the thing. Like, that feels like I'm not allowed. I'm like, okay, that's something we need to explore. But yeah, it's a fascinating thing. But finding that kind of sense of flow, taking the tools, and then like kind of accepting how malleable we are and how we're going to be pliant, and we need to trust our ability to like intuit what needs to be done. And I think one more thing I'll throw at you, when I say intuition, people, I say be intuitive. People hear me saying guess at random, but that's not what I mean. I mean to tune in, like to really pay attention. Like, how do I feel? Like, if I really tune into my breath, can I feel there's a little restriction here? Maybe because I'm aware that a camera's on me. Like, so
The
just to be
idea of
mindful. Yeah.
I think it was the Love Guru, but I may be mistaken. But he's like, "Into me I see." For in,
Yes. Yeah. 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 Like it can't, because they're like you. So I just guess. No, Daryl. What I said was I want you to tune. I want you to pay attention. And sometimes what I'll do with people who struggle with feeling, I'll say, okay, do that thing at random, but tune into how it makes you feel. And I'll ask people a lot of questions. And sometimes I'll give people like two different types of breath patterns, and I'll say like, what did you feel with this one versus the other one? And I try to give people stuff that you kind of can't help but feel something, you know. And over time, it grows. And I pulled people out of the abyss before, um, and some of them become like the best feelers you ever did see, you know.
Mhm.
But yeah, a lot of people, once they know it that this is a thing, they kind of fall in love with it. I've even had some clients for whom it's become their whole career once they once they realize like, oh, I didn't know this world existed. But
Totally
yeah, it's really powerful. But there is no liberation of the voice without finding some degree of regulation of the nervous system, some degree of freedom in the body, and restoring healthy tonus to the posture and healthy flow to the breath cycle. Because if you don't have these things, nothing's gonna stick, not for long. Yeah.
agreed. The intrinsic rhythm, the song that plays inside, not the one that you
Mhm.
play with your mind, but the one that plays without you having a say of it. And we say high vibration, low vibration in certain circles of like esoteric
Yeah.
meaning. And the reality of it is, if the frequency of electrical output is more constant, then the thing that needs to be done is maintaining a tolerance or upregulating your experience of like capacitating that higher threshold without it burning you out, making you angry, making you depressive. And the nature is people think going to the place is the low vibrational thing. No, it's because that's where you are right now. You're creating hurdles for yourself when the reality of it is life is burdensome
Yeah.
and you are encumbered, that is because you are burdened. So if we
Yeah.
don't figure that out, then you're going to always be encumbered. There will always be burdens behind the next obstacle. Um, I don't mean to cut off the conversation. I do got to get going because I have a call. I wanted
Yeah.
to
So do
leave
I.
a suggestion that I really enjoyed this call. It was great, and I'd love to continue it. Something that I've seen as an issue in my space, in particular in the fitness space, with all these self-proclaimed movement gurus, is that more often than not, there's some limiting factor in their self-sociability. Like they're not smiling, they're not interacting with themselves. You can see something that's like a kinetic hamperance if you were to look at anyone and be like, okay, it seems like something's going on. Are they well? If there is there an issue, whatever. And the idea that that's not even in communal conversation because that person who's orchestrating the education doesn't talk on it, there's a huge degree of the mirror that you pursue is going to be the mirror that you reflect, and I'm sure we can get into that for hours on end, but uh, maybe just I wanted to put that out in the space. Like, we're going to continue this conversation. That's something I'd like to get into.
Yeah, freaking love that. I know you got to go, but this was great. I look forward to more in the future. But yeah, uh, enjoy the rest of your day, man. I'm gonna shut up because yeah, I'll start talking for like 3 hours.
I
All right.
appreciate you so much, dude. It was a
All
great
right.
conversation. Good seeing you.